All right, we're all set.
Okay, I'd like to call the special meeting of the City Commission to order on Monday, May 3rd, and start with a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Olsman. Mayor Pro Tem Olsman. Jules, can you hear us?
Jules? Well, let me text him.
Okay.
What's the problem?
Okay.
I want to make sure your audio is
Now
on.
if you can hear us. Okay. Roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem
Hello?
Olsman.
Not hearing me?
Now we are. Are you present in Huntington Woods? Are you hearing us?
Doesn't sound like it. He might need to reboot his computer, maybe.
Okay.
Well,
Turn off the video. Just try the audio only.
Jules, can you hear us?
I'll send him a text.
Okay.
Why don't we just, continue.
Continuing on, roll call vote. City Commissioner Joe Rozelle.
Present, Huntington Woods.
Commissioner Jenks.
President Huntington Woods.
Commissioner Elder.
Present in Huntington Woods.
Mayor Paul, present in Huntington Woods.
He can't hear.
Jules cannot hear us. Can you try rebooting?
I'll tell him that. All right. While we get ready for that, I'm gonna also make Tim co-host so that he can share a screen because Tim has a PowerPoint, right, Tim?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, can I answer for Mayor Pro Tem Olsman that he is present?
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes.
you.
Now.
Can you hear
I
us?
can't hear you.
Maybe it'll be better
I
if it
can't
was the other
hear.
way around.
I'm here.
Be nice.
I sent a text and suggested he reboot his computer. All right.
Why don't I mute my? Yeah, I'm gonna mute myself on there and just listen to it on the phone.
Okay, can you hear us on your phone? You muted yourself, so we can't hear you. Okay, I'm going to answer for him. He is present in Huntington Woods.
He's been visually sighted.
Okay, because this is a special meeting, we can only talk about items that are on the agenda. And there is only one item on the agenda, and that is the presentation of the budget, the proposed budget for 2021, 2022. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy and Tim and let them start.
Amy, you're muted.
Tim's got a PowerPoint with the general overview of the proposed budget for 2020, 2021. So let's start with that, and then we could take questions from the commission. And the department heads are all on the Zoom call if there's any specific questions about department activities. Right.
Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so feel free to jump in and interrupt me anytime you want to go further detail into anything here. But the highlights of the budget here, so we have an addition of a part-time communications employee here at City Hall and the elimination of one part-time recreation position due to staff realignment with retirements. There's a 2.25% wage increase across the board for employees. That's consistent with the public safety contract. The public works and command officers contracts are set to expire June 30th of this year. And the budget calls for the same levels of service across the board. The taxable value of the city increased by 3.71%, but due to Headley, we're only able to capture the inflationary adjustment. So we're only going to see a 1.4% increase in our taxes this year. And you can see on the chart there, the general fund and the sanitation fund have Headley rollbacks. And we have a reduction in the debt millage this year due to the George W. Kuhn from the county going down. So that's going to be on the winter tax bill. So we're probably going to see people getting a reduction on the winter tax bill and a small increase in the summer tax bill overall. On state share revenue, we're budgeting $651,000. At this time last year, there was a lot of doomsday projections that we could see 30% reductions in this. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and we're looking at about a 2.8% increase over last year. And like I said before, the average tax bill will go down by about $7.71. That's primarily going to be on the winter tax bill, where it'll go down. The summer will go up by inflation. Our MERS pension costs. So MERS is telling us we have to give them $967,000 this year. That's a sharp decrease from the prior year of $1,596,000. There are assumption changes coming again with MERS next year. And we're still only 61% funded. We haven't been able to make a lot of headway in our percentage. So I'm recommending that we keep our contributions steady at the $1.6 million level, because we know that our contributions are going to go back up in the coming years. And we want to make some headway on that funded percentage. This is a chart from MERS showing our required contributions. So the blue line is kind of where they're telling us that we should contribute, but that purple line on the top is what we actually probably should be contributing in order to meet our goal of being fully funded by 2040. So there is an end in sight here at 2040 where we'll be 100% funded in our pension system. So the Act 345 millage, it's going to be 1.999 mils. We passed that last year in March to fund public safety pensions and pull that cost out of the general fund. This is part of a recommendation from the Long Range Budget Committee to address our road and liability costs. And this frees up $800,000 from the general fund that was previously going towards pension costs. So what are we going to do with that $800,000 savings? We're sticking to what we originally said. We're going to do $331,000 to go towards a debt payment on debt we issued to fix the roads and the sewers. A $234,000 additional contribution towards a road maintenance fund, bring our annual road maintenance funding to $400,000 per year. And with the $235,000 that's left, I'm recommending we put it towards our OPEB liability. So what is our OPEB liability? We're paying $307,000 for pay-as-you-go to pay for the current retirees. We're also going to contribute $423,000 towards our liability. That's an increase of $235,000 from our Act 345 savings. We currently still have an $11.5 million liability and are only 13.5% funded. So we're trying to make an additional effort towards funding these long-term liabilities. So the general fund as a whole, the one thing I'll point out that you should have noticed new this year is we're doing a 2-year budget. So there's a new planned column. We're only adopting 1 year at a time, but we are showing a balanced budget for 2 years here. But if you look at the budget 2021-22, we're at $8.3 million. You see the revenues over expenditures of $61,000. That's due to the budget stabilization fund putting money aside for cases of emergencies. And we're at 46% fund balance, which is a very healthy fund balance level. Where does the general fund get its money from? Primarily tax collections, 80%. A small percentage, 8% from state revenue sharing and grants. Building permits and licenses, 5%, and 6% from miscellaneous fines and fees. And where does that money go? 33% of the general fund budget is for public safety, 16% for admin, a small 0.2% for commission, 36% transfers to other funds, 3% liability insurance, 7% library, and 5% public works. In the past, when you saw this pie chart, you would have seen public safety more like 45%. That's gone down to 33% by pulling out those pension costs and putting them into a separate fund, funded by a separate millage through Act 345. I wanted to point out on the commission budget, we did make a change here from the budget that you received in the hard copy. Commissioner Jenks requested that we remove the city as a whole memberships that are not for a particular person, like MML and SEMCOG, that are for the entire city, that we remove those from the commission budget, move them to the administration budget, which I've done here. And the other thing I wanted to point out here is the $2,000 for anti-racism initiatives, that this is not intended to represent the entire amount that is allocated for this plan. There's additional funds for the master plan, the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and other parts of the budget. And additional expenditures include ongoing training, teen council initiatives, library materials, and the public safety accreditation process. In the city hall budget, you'll see the major changes here. The increase of $36,000 in wages is because of the new part-time communications employee we've hired in. A small decrease in hospitalization costs. We have a reduction in postage costs by $3,000, primarily because we had 3 elections last year, so we had increased mailings. I wanted to point out this professional services line item. We have $55,000 budgeted. So that's a line item for the various different studies and in consulting activities that the city does. So this is a spot where if we were to go forward with phase 2 of the diversity and equity plan, there'll be funds available there to fund that project. That's projected at $20,000. You'll see the $13,000 increase in memberships and dues is from that reallocation from commission to the city hall budget. At public safety, we have an increase in salaries based on the union contract at 2.25%. You'll see here that there's also a $2,000 increase in uniform. That's also from their union contract. There's a decrease of $25,000 in professional services. So this is due to the Berkeley dispatch contract. We knew that we were going to get a large increase in the new contract, but we were able to negotiate it so it was tiered in over a 4-year period. So we're going to see a reduction in this year, but you'll see next year it's jumping back up as we phase into that contract. And then the $10,000 increase in equipment rental, that's due to 2 years from now, we're going to purchase a new fire truck, which is a $500,000 purchase. So we're putting money aside so we can purchase that vehicle in 2 years. So as a whole, you're seeing just a $25,000 increase in this budget, which is less than 1% increase. In the library budget, it's very much a status quo. There's a decrease here in hospitalization costs. And we have a $4,000 increase here to the databases and online services budget line item. That's due to the ongoing changeover to more online services and providing different features for residents virtually. In the recreation fund, so this is the area that we're still fighting with COVID. So it's still, you'll see the numbers kind of all over the place here when you look at the 2018-19 through the planned year. We're projecting a small use of fund balance in the current year of $23,000. And we're planning on having to do additional general fund contributions in the amount of $1,085,000 this year. So they're still dealing with reduced capacity with the camps and the pool. So Tracy and I worked together to really figure out what that number would be for revenue, with the reduced capacity in the camp and pool and how we can offset that. And we did the best we could to offset the revenue and expenses and minimize the general fund transfer. You'll see in 2022-23, we're going to be more back to a normal budget at 2.2 million. And the fund balance here at 13%, that's still pretty low. We see it's improving over the 9% we had back in 2018-2019. So the goal would be to try to get that fund balance up and then decrease those general fund transfers here to this fund. And this kind of shows where the recreation fund gets their money. So 53% is coming from the general fund right now, and 43% from programs, and a small 4% on the tax bill. Historically, the programs and the transfer would be kind of flip-flopped on this. It'd be like 53% from programs and about 45 or so % from the general fund. But with COVID, we're having to do additional transfers here to offset the losses from reduced capacity. Where the recreation money goes, 38% is the administrative department, 35% to programs, 10% is for the parks maintenance employees, 15% swimming pool, and 2% the city bus. So what kind of changed in the rec budget this year? We did eliminate one part-time position through retirements and consolidating different jobs together. I talked about we have to reduce capacities at the pool and camp that we're dealing with this summer. We did complete the fee study that was a result of the long-range budget committee. We have the results of that, and we're going to bring forward recommendations in the next year on increasing different fees throughout the rec center to make sure we fully recoup our costs. I did want to mention the budget right now does not include funding for the fireworks. We're planning on that likely not happening this year. If the fireworks were to take place, it'd be an additional $16,000. But there is funding here for the other 4th of July activities that we normally would have, like the hot dog roast and the pancakes and the parade and all that. We're still dealing with difficulties with the overall cost of operation versus the ability to garner revenue from the programs, kind of getting that balance between the price you charge the residents and the revenue that we need to cover the cost. And the sanitation funds, so the sanitation fund is at our Headley max, so we don't have any more room to levy any more millage. We do have a balanced budget this year at $625,000. We'll see in the plan year, we're looking like we're gonna have to use some fund balance next year. We are at about 22% fund balance, so that's okay at this point, but it's something to keep our eye on going forward. The sanitation money goes primarily straight to SACRA for our trash contract. There's also some salaries and wages, equipment rental fees for the leaf trucks, and 1% supplies. I mentioned it's at the millage cap of 1.52 mils. We're seeing an increase in SACRA costs of 2.5%. So that's kind of the problem we have to keep an eye on here is when costs are going up by 2.5%, but we're only able to get an inflationary increase of 1.4% in taxes. That's not going to be sustainable long-term here. And the main goal for sanitation to continue to increase participation in all their programs and expand shredding and scrap metal events throughout the city. The water and sewer fund, it gets all of its money from the water bill. So there's 83% of it is from water sales, 12% is from the sewer debt payment fee that's on the bills, and 5% from the ready to serve fee, and small amounts for investment interest and miscellaneous. Where does that money go? Well, it's primarily sewer costs more so than water costs. Sewage costs are 36%. Water purchasing through SACWA, 13%. 9% capital charges, which includes the sewer lining program. 3% for supplies, which includes water meter upgrades. 3% maintenance, 13% salary and benefits. And the 19% transfers out. That's transfer out to make the debt payment through the new sewer bond fee. Transfer out to the debt service fund. So we're planning on having no increase in the water rate this year, keeping it flat at 13.25%. The reason for that is that usage has been up pretty substantially in the last year, maybe due to people being at home for COVID, maybe a reason for that. And in the prior year, SACWA delayed the rate increase, so we want to pass that savings back to the residents like it should be. Sewage and stormwater fees are increasing by 1.4% from the county. You can see there the breakdown is more stormwater than the sewage fee. And the rates from SACWA are increasing 2% on the variable rate and essentially decreasing on their fixed rate by 2.7%. But we're planning on having a flat rate and not increasing that to the residents this year. We have $250,000 budgeted here for year 4 of the sewer lining program. And on the sewer bond repayment fee, we're actually going to decrease that down from $235 in the current year down to $1.92. And the reason for that is because we had higher than projected water usage. And when the original fee was added last year, it was based on preliminary estimates, and we got better than planned interest rates on the bond, and the timing of the bond payments was different than what we originally expected. So going forward, we shouldn't see these large variations like this. It should be more steady going forward. But we're happy to get back 43 cents per unit on the water rate here. Construction projects, another big construction year this year, $6.9 million. We have the sewer lining like we talked about, 1.5 million for sewer pipe bursting, 2.5 million for the rear yard sewer program, 1.9 million for road replacement and water mains under those roads, those are the complete reconstructions. And out of those savings from the Act 345 millage and that new road maintenance fund, we're gonna do $750,000 of mill and resurface throughout the city. So that's gonna be a big project scattered throughout the city. For capital improvement purchases, we have $11,000 in computer replacements, $40,000 for the master plan that's already started in the current year, but it's going to be continuing into the new fiscal year. $6,000 for firewall upgrade. The city hall copy machine needs to be replaced at a cost of $16,000. The air conditioning unit at city hall, $12,000. Street light LED conversion, that's a rebudget from the current year. We're going to go forward with converting those street lights. $20,000 for HVAC improvements at the rec center, $130,000 for the Reynolds Park improvement project, $55,000 for the Burton Park infield improvements. And new this year with the public safety, they're requesting funding for body cams and tasers. This is a little different where it's going to be a $37,900 initial investment, then a $26,860 per year cost going forward. So this would be all the video would be stored on the servers of the company. It wouldn't be anything on city servers. It's all fully warranted. So if anything gets damaged in the field, it gets replaced at no cost. And every third year, they do a complete equipment refresh and everybody gets the new upgraded equipment. And we do a similar program for the Scout car cameras, where it's an $8,920 annual cost. And every 5 years, it'd be replaced with the newer equipment. Everything's stored on the third-party servers. We also have a $6,500 for a replacement copy machine at public safety. And for equipment replacement, we're replacing a 1997 dump truck at DPW at $120,000. The water meter van at $70,000. This 2005 pickup truck, that was an item from last year's budget that we delayed due to COVID that we're going to go forward with this year at $41,000. And public safety wants to replace 2 Ford Explorers with new Chevy Tahoes. So what's not in this budget? The American Rescue Plan Act. So we're scheduled to receive $618,000 in the new stimulus. The allowable uses are to respond to the pandemic or negative impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. COVID-19 expenditures or negative economic impacts, including assistance to small businesses, households, and hard-hit industries. So that could potentially be used to offset revenue losses for the city. Premium pay for essential workers, and investment in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So we're scheduled to receive half of this payment this May. I'm not optimistic that we're actually going to receive it this May. So we didn't include it in the budget. We plan to bring budget amendments as we get the funding. But right now we're recommending using $499,000 of this fund to pay for the water main that's already planned to be done this summer. And that would free up those bond funds. We'd have $499,000 in additional bond funds then to use to do more road improvements. And the remaining funds could offset the additional transfers we had made to the rec center to cover the budget revenue losses there. So that's my overview of the budget. Now we'll go on to any questions and comments.
Thank you, Tim. Let us start with the City Commission. Do they have any comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple. With regard to the pension funding, you're projecting it's 61%. If we put the extra money aside this year and do 1.5 instead of, I think it was around 900,000, where will that put our funding percentage?
You know, it's really hard to say because we've been putting extra money with MERS every year. We've been putting, one year we put $1 million. We've been putting additional $250,000 to $300,000 each year. And that funding percentage has stayed in that 59 to 63%. It's been difficult to get it to move. because
Okay.
MERS keeps making assumption changes and they're very unpredictable.
They do. And I'm curious, did we lose any retirees this year due to COVID?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, because I mean, they're looking at the effect that COVID had on lifespan and whatnot, and mortality tables may be updated, which may actually work in the city's favor, as unfortunate as that sounds. So we'll see how that pans out. My second question is, I'm thinking that we want to allocate some funds toward the gardens at key entryways into the city. And I've talked with our former county commissioner, Helene Zach, in terms of her kind of spearheading our garden club initiative. But some of these gardens are at a point where I think we need to use, an outside contractor to come in, get the garden to an appropriate stage, and then turn it over to this group to maintain it. And then I've been talking with Amy about, having it watered by the city possibly, or having water brought over so that these can be maintained. So I do want city administration to explore and possibly prioritize some of these gardens at key entryways to the city, and sort of prioritize them in appearance and how they look, and then a budget for each one. We probably can't tackle them all in 1 year. That's fine. But if we take 1 or 2 a year, we can eventually get through all of them relatively quick. Last question, and then I'll stop talking, is for the chief, and that is with these body cams. This video is going to be stored on a third-party server. How is that? I'm assuming it's still subject to FOIA. And how is this third party protecting that video so that it doesn't get out and into folks' hands? And now we've got video clips out there because some hackers have got access to it, and our residents maybe are on video out in cyberspace. So what protections does this third party company have in place?
Well, they too would do what we do with their IT department is in regards to their server and the software that they use. Obviously, they're responsible. The liabilities on them. As far as the FOIA, that's why we actually have the access and redaction equipment through them to redact all those videos under FOIA. So they are in complete control of that, but they hold that liability. And they're obviously that's why Axon, we went with Axon. They're used, majority of the departments in Michigan and others around the country use Axon. They're a very big company. So obviously it's very important to them to keep that secure.
And I mean, Chief, you see a trend, where more and more departments are utilizing this technology. I think it's important. It's an accountability thing. It protects citizens. It protects officers. I think it's probably somewhere where we need to be. And this isn't something that I necessarily mind investing in, because I think that it's frankly the right thing to do to protect everybody. Not that we necessarily have a problem here, because we haven't seen that, but in the event that there ever were to be one, I think that this would be important to have. And I'm just curious your opinion on that.
Oh, absolutely. The accountability, transparency, and risk management would highly recommend it because of liability, obviously, to have the cameras. And I perceive in the near future, it could be an unfunded mandate from the federal government too. I've requested this in the budget this year. Oak Park has, and so has Berkeley. Royal Oak already has the cameras. Pleasant Ridge has the Axon system, which is also the same company that makes our Taser. That's what makes it so much better for us to use them. Also, obviously, the Sheriff's Department, State Police, Royal Oak, Birmingham, they already have these in place. I think most people are probably surprised that we don't have those. So I highly recommend them. I haven't requested, I've been here almost 7 years now, and I haven't requested because it is so expensive. That is a lot of money for these cameras, but obviously it's a very important equipment that's, I think, is necessary at this time. And the improvement of the cameras is really, the state-of-the-art equipment now is so much better than when it first came out. And the other thing is these cameras through Axon, what's nice about this system is anytime an officer pulls a weapon from his holster there's a sensor in the holster, the camera automatically activates. If they pull out a taser, the camera automatically activates. If they turn on the siren or lights, the camera automatically activates. Same thing when they exit the vehicle. So they've really come a long way with these cameras. When they first came out, the cameras weren't as good as they are today. So I think now is the time to jump on board with everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I have two questions. One is a follow-up. They're actually both the issues that Commissioner Roselle brought up. One is on the gardens. I think it would be really helpful to see a priority list of which gardens are needing the most help and, you know, that time frame. My question is to Tim. Would the American Recovery Act, any of those, because it's infrastructure, because it's for public health, it's trying to get people outside, and it is also a part of the, you know, parks beautification and placemaking, but it's a good thing for people in general. Would that be a qualified type of expense? And then I'll let Tim answer that, and I have another question for Chief Pazahowski. Thank you.
The only thing they've really said so far about infrastructure is the water, sewer, and broadband. But if we were to offset those transfers to the rec center with part of that money, that would free up some general fund money that could be put towards the parks.
Okay. So I don't know what the next steps would be in terms of, I don't want to necessarily say we need a study, but what city manager, Amy, what do you think would be a logical next step if we were to look into this?
It'd be something that we could refer to our Arts and Garden Board for their input on priority for parks. And then we put together bid specifications for the work that needs to be done.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful to see what initial infusion of investment is needed, and also the sustainability side of it too, of how to keep it going and make this a positive experience for our volunteers. So my second question is for the chief.
Before you move on to your next question,
Oh, yes,
can I just make a comment on the Adopt-A Gardens?
sure.
Over the years, and I don't think we've done it in the last few years, but we were adding water to many of these gardens. So as you're doing this study, it would be nice to add which gardens have already had the water added. And maybe we can make those a priority, since some of the cost to bringing water into those gardens has already been incurred for those. Just, it would be interesting to know which ones have. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so for public safety, Chief, I know you and I have talked before about community relations and really beefing up on some of those efforts. Because of COVID this past year, we've been limited in what we were able to do as public safety, but you still went out and did parades and, you know, other things throughout the year, and participated in the Burton 5th grade graduation last year. So really great that you did that. So can you comment on what you think that we could do in putting together this initiative to do more community relations, to, you know, really be on the ground in the neighborhood, getting more face-to-face time with residents? So I would really like to see that if we're going to continue, you know, invest in these body cams, which for accountability and transparency clearly makes a lot of sense. But I would also, in addition to that, want to see a really robust rollout of community relations efforts.
As we talked earlier, it's more difficult for us being a small city and not having a business district like a village where the officers can walk the beat and they're close to their cars and there's a large amount of people. But so for us, I think to locate our officers or in a location like the rec center, the library, in Burton School, like we have a lot of different events, like we talked before, this summer, COVID is what's preventing us from doing it right now, but I thought about coffee with a cop, like we talked before, possibly ice cream social with the kids. We'll reach out for funding and possibly give out ice cream and have officers doing that. In the summer, I'm hoping to do something like that at the rec center to be more involved in those locations. I assign the officers to the school crossings, obviously, and try to at least speak to the kids as they see them and the families they see. But as we talked before, a lot of times they are in transit to get home. So it would be nice to be able to spend more time on the weekends or any other events we might have at the park. But that's what we'll try to focus on. As you know, the shift strength is an issue with us. We only have 1 to 2 cars on the road. The other 2 officers have to remain with the fire apparatus because we are a public safety department. We're not just police only. So I would like to try to get more involved that way this summer and then see whatever other ideas. Like I talked to, possibly to educate the general public, whether it's through YouTube videos or the Commissioner Corner, to try to get more information out that way too. So that's what I plan on doing this next year.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Bob?
Yes, Commissioner Jacks?
Yeah, I've received requests to see public safety funds diverted for social workers and mental health workers. I would rather see those folks focusing on reestablishing mental health as a program in this state. It was sort of eliminated for the most part in 1992, and our bed shortage is unbelievable. We've got about 2,500 beds to serve 1.3 million estimated Michiganders with a mental health condition. I think that becomes critical, but the focus should be on improving the mental health system in the state. When we've looked at police departments around the country and what their conflicts are, I think our department has been way ahead of the pack. We are audited and have been a member of the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies since 2006. In fact, we were the 3rd department to join. Today, there are only 10 departments statewide that are audited on an annual basis and an in-depth audit every 3 years. And actually, our department went through an in-depth audit this year. But some of the things that that audit found was they deal with really the abuse of force by police that's resulted in the loss of civilian lives, especially Black lives countrywide. So they really looked at 5 different issues. On officer performance and conduct, they investigated 1 citizen complaint against an officer, and it was unfounded. For last year, they had 1 complaint in 2019 and 2018. They had no complaints in 2017 and 2016. Use of force analysis. 7 officers presented use of force reports, all involved drawing their pistols, all were found justified. They were also evaluated for trends and patterns, force and race, age and gender, and any resulting injury to any persons. None was reported. All involved assisting other departments. The 3rd area was vehicle pursuit analysis. Officers were involved in 0 vehicle pursuits. In addition, there were no incidents involving roadblocks or forcible stopping techniques. These are actually prohibited by Huntington Woods progressive department policies. Officers involved in motor vehicle crashes, 0. Union grievances, none filed in 2020. This department has been racially integrated, at least for the 20 years that I've served on the commission. One of the concerns many people have had, including myself, is the multiplication when you're stopped and if you're poor. And so, I mean, people have said there's a penalty for driving while poor or driving while black. Well, at the beginning of this year on January 4th, the governor signed 20 different bipartisan bills, which really stopped the duplication on what's going on. They created bills created alternatives to jail, changed the penalties for traffic offenses, and challenged the ticketing system entirely. And our judges in the 45th District Court have also been doing a lot of this. So the issues previously presented, for the most part, will disappear because of legislative and court action. I do support the addition of the new equipment that others have raised a question about, and I support it for the same reasons. I believe it's progressive. It documents without accidents what's going on. Basically, you turn on the lights, you open the door, you pull your pistol or your taser from its harness, and in all instances, that camera goes on. There's no lost story or story that's different than the video. I support the public safety budget the way it's presented. And the one thing I think we forget about is the response, our immediate response when there's distress. My wife had a heart attack. Public safety was there with response within 2 minutes. I went through diabetic shock. Public safety was there, reacting, responding correctly, quickly. We sometimes forget about this one aspect of the fire service because fortunately you haven't had to call upon it. But I can assure you, it is a nice thing to have. And the reality is it saves us money.
Mr. Mayor, can I jump in real quick on that?
Sure, Ken.
Yeah, I spoke with the chief at length about this because I heard from a number of residents who felt very strongly about a reduction in our public safety budget. I also heard from residents who felt very strongly about not cutting our public safety budget. So I wanted to, understand, and I spoke at length with our chief about it. And just so those watching at home that maybe don't really understand, our public safety department, these folks function as police officers, firefighters, and first responders to medical runs. So, and the majority of the police budget, as you could see by Tim's presentation this evening, is salaries, fringe benefits, and overtime, a lot of which are settled in the union contract. And these public safety officers have Act 312 arbitration, which no other union folks have in the state. They've bargained with us in good faith for the last few contracts. But there is a minimum amount of manpower when you are a public safety department. So if a few officers rush into a burning building, that means a number of officers have to remain outside. We are at that minimum. We cannot cut or we'll be in violation of state law and likely OSHA work rules and probably a number of things. So to just say that there needs to be a reduction, the majority of the budget, and we've made significant strides to reduce overtime. I credit our city manager and our public safety director to come up with a system to cap overtime in retirements and to come up with a a progressive sergeant, lieutenant sort of system there, so that if someone called in, we weren't having to bring another command officer in on overtime. There was already a sergeant on that shift then that could assume that responsibility. So we've done a number of things to attempt to, reduce this budget, but we get to a point where some of these folks were calling for such significant reductions that it would really impact our ability to fight a fire. Or if someone was choking, it would take a significant amount of time to respond to that individual, and could mean the difference between whether that person is alive or dead, by the time we were to reach them. So it's a balance. And I think we've really tried to do the best we can here and make sure that it's balanced. But in the end, our manpower is our manpower. Our minimum manning is our minimum manning. And Chief, if there's anything that you want to share that perhaps I didn't cover, or something that you want to provide additional clarity on, I'd welcome it. But that's really what we're faced with here, is the number of officers are what they are. We just can't cut people.
Said it well, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. We wear three hats. We're not just police officers. I am actually the fire chief, and I am a police chief. And these officers are firefighters, they're medical first responders, they're certified by the state in all three. So we unfortunately, we can't reduce manpower whatsoever. In fact, we run on overtime the way it is because we only have a 17-man department, including me. But fortunately, the officers are willing to come in and work that overtime, which actually saves the city money, because in cities our size that are public safety departments, they'd have at least 4 more officers. But we actually save money by paying the overtime, but because we're fortunate these officers are willing to come in and work that overtime. So yeah, absolutely, we cannot afford to lose anybody, or we would have to reach out to someone else to take care of firefighting for this city, and that's something you don't want to do.
And don't we also have a lot of cooperative agreements? So when we need that extra power, or vice versa, we can call it in, it costs us nothing.
Absolutely. Remember, if I'm only running two to three officers on a road, maybe 4 people counting the engineer for the truck. So the way public safety works is we depend on our mutual aid partners. So anytime we have a fire, that's any working fire, we're going to be there. Berkeley's going to be there. Oak Park's going to be there, and a lot of times Beverly Hills will be there. So we, at any working fire, will have probably up to between 20 and 30 firefighters responding to that scene. In fact, we fight most of our fires in Oak Park and Berkeley and Beverly Hills. We've been very fortunate to have very few fires. But if we need them, or a commercial fire, we have access. Those are our partners. They immediately respond to the scene. So even our mutual aid partners are at the fire scene within 5 minutes. And if it's a conflagration that happened to possibly occur on Woodward Avenue with commercial businesses, we can also reach out. They're in our group, which would be Royal Oak and Ferndale also. So we have it covered, but we depend on each other. With that being said, we need to be there for the other agencies. That's why we can't reduce manpower either. If it's a quid pro quo, if we do it for them, they're going to do it for us. So we have to be there. We can't be any fewer men than what we have right now.
Thank you.
Okay. We did have a few questions that came in on chat. Let me start with those before we go to public. First one was an overtime question. How does overtime for public safety compare to other years? I think we sort of addressed why we have overtime. It is used mainly to make sure that we are maintaining minimum levels, cover some vacation time. When we have major events in the city, such as the 4th of July, a lot of the officers are called in at the same time. The budget for this year is the same amount as last year, would be the answer to the question there. Chief, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, and like I said, unfortunately, when somebody doesn't understand that, they see the overtime budget and they think that's extremely high. But a city our size, we're a 17-man department counting the chief. Most cities that are public safety departments that are our size are 24 public safety officers, 24. If you were to bring the department up to that, I think Tim would tell you, it'll cost you twice what you're paying in the overtime right now.
Yeah, we ran the numbers, and so when you hire new officers with the full benefits and the health insurance, the costs of the fully burdened public safety officers outweighed the reduction in overtime, so it wouldn't make sense.
Okay. Another question was asked, if another police department asked for the video, do they get access?
Well, the video would go to them under discovery if it's their prosecutor, because it's going to be from our Oakland County prosecutor, obviously, if that's what you're trying to say. So that would be part of discovery. Yes, they would have that access to that. Absolutely.
Okay. Steve Gold, you have your hand raised. I'll start with you, and Richard Feldman, I see you raising your hand, so we'll get to you next.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. My question is about the, I guess this is for Tim, about the Parks and Rec administration budget. I noticed that it was 38% of the total. That seems high for an administration component of a department. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the administrative department covers the rec director, the secretary, and the maintenance staff at the building there, and all the costs for the building, including the heating and cooling of the building, utility costs. So as part of this fee study we just completed is trying to allocate some of those costs out to the programs more. So it's really more of an accounting thing, the way it's presented. We're trying to put those costs out to the programs more, so let's say, so Latchkey would bear a burden of the utility costs, camps would bear a burden of all those costs as well. So it's not really, administrative is not really the best term for it. It's kind of just a catch-all for the overall department there.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah, thank you. First time coming to this kind of conversation or meeting. So it's, I think there's no doubt that when we've called 911 and we've had emergency needs in the house, the public safety people have been here. There's no question about that. I think the question that I know I'm raising, the concern I'm raising, I'm very excited that and maybe this has happened before, I don't know enough of the history, that there is a budget for anti-racist work. But too much of the rest of the budget seems business as usual at a time when we're trying to figure out how to change. And a budget should reflect the kind of changes we want to make. So for example, the Berkeley, California Police Department recently passed, will no longer make traffic stops for minor offenses, part of a package of reforms the city council approved Tuesday. And so when I hear comments about other cities using getting new tasers and getting new equipment and accountability, also know that facial recognition is used and misused and is only 30% accurate for Black folks. And that's a very dangerous thing for my city to be handing over to any other city in this, anywhere. That's number one. So I don't know if you're familiar with all those statistics about data and facial recognition. The second is how modernizing tools that people say are for accountability. I could show you as much research that says it doesn't create accountability. It doesn't do a lot more other than feed a whole bunch of businesses who are into this surveillance stuff. So can you show me anything that all the surveillance, all the use of tasers, all the auto cams have had a positive impact on making the community safer rather than business as usual? And I would love to see Huntington Woods become a pioneer in becoming something different. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't expect it to happen tonight. But business as usual, comparing ourselves to other predominantly white cities or even black cities in Detroit is no answer to this question.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Does anybody have data to show that all of this expense matters? Other than we feel good, just like the US military feels good, that it spends $670 billion.
Well, in most of the cases recently, there were no police cameras. What we saw last week or 2 weeks ago was a bystander's camera. What we saw in the killing in North Carolina was a bystander's camera. They didn't have cameras on. They made sure when they practiced racism that no one could see them. And so it was a stranger that had to capture it. We are and have been part of a program with CALEA where we've been audited not internally, but externally as well for the last 15 years. So we don't get someone that slips under the radar. But, you know, the big problem is what police departments in many places do, or some officers. I don't want to label the entire department, but some officers shut their cameras off and say, hey, I didn't know anything. Every case that we've recently seen was very frequently something that was recorded by a bystander, not by the officer's camera.
My question
So-
is, could you show me why we need it? Not that they don't use them in other places, and show me where they've used them that it's mattered.
Are you asking about body cameras?
I'm asking about body cameras, tasers, new equipment, all this stuff. To me, it's just a,
Well,
go ahead, show me, yes.
Okay, I'm going to answer it as one of the few people you're going to talk to here tonight who, as a lawyer, has handled multiple 1983 civil rights violation cases against police departments. I mean, body cameras, and this, you know, before body cameras, it was dash cams in cars to try to create some method of recording an event so that if there was an adverse occurrence, there would be an objective, or at least seemingly objective view of what took place. The body camera movement in policing is been going on for a number of years now, in terms of answering, you know, this, when the question comes up, what actually happened, for example, in that tragedy in Minnesota with the young kid who tried, you know, was being detained and then made an attempt to take off, that was all captured on body cam. The police officer's comment about taser was recorded on a police body cam. So that's the reason. So when you know, we hear so much about all this today, I get the question, so what good does all this do? But I guess the answer is, what went on before when there was no recording? What was there to challenge a statement of a police officer that he or she was in fear for her life when an occurrence took place? So, I mean, I think body cams are just a reality now in 2021. I mean, you're only going to see more of them, and I think that like I said, there's two arguments. One is they're a deterrent to misconduct because everything is being recorded. The other statement would be, well, it provides an objective analysis, and I'm not so sure that it's possible to get empirical data, as you're asking, to say, well, how do we know it makes any difference? I think we're pretty early in the experience to know the answer to that question empirically. I don't know that anybody knows that. But I think that the reality is, and the other thing is, technology has improved dramatically to the point where now you can have a little thing on your collar that records everything. I mean, before it was just audio recordings, and before that there was nothing. So it was strictly what was ever in the police report. But there, in addition to all these things, we're looking at legislation that may abrogate or significantly reduce the impact of what's called qualified immunity, which is essentially the ability of law enforcement to act without fear of civil litigation. And I mean, that's very much on the table here now with regard to the new legislation. So, we're all caught up in things that are going on at the national level here. It's not so much as to what's going on right here in Huntington Woods, because if we based it on Huntington Woods, I mean, truthfully speaking, I mean, the police department, public safety officers that we have there, I've lived in Huntington Woods for 45 years. You're hard pressed to find, other than like what Mr. Feldman indicated, that when you needed them, they were there and you were happy to see them. And you're not going to find a lot of long litany of complaints about the way people have conducted themselves. And so I think we're looking at a societal shift, dramatic societal shift with regard to some of these issues, like the mention that was made about the legislative changes that just went through with regard to fines and so forth with respect to vehicle offenses. So, but you ask a very good question. I'm just not so sure we're at any point in the process that would allow empirical backup for, yes, body cams prevent X number of occurrences or anything like that. I don't think we're there yet.
Mayor Pro Tem Olson makes a good point there that body cameras are new, fairly new, and a lot of people say, Huntington Woods is very progressive, and I think this is something that our department is showing. They're on the leading edge. They're doing what is right, and I'm very much in favor of that as well. Moving on to the next question, Chris Skolombowski. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I two questions about the public safety. One, the body cameras. Does the officer have the ability to turn on and off that on his own, just his or her discretion? And two, with the vehicle choice, looks like we're looking at full-size Chevy Tahoes to replace some other vehicles. Are we looking at hybrid technology with those vehicles, and or what was the reasonings for the full-size SUVs?
Well, we've always had full-size SUVs. We're a public safety department, and because of that, all of our fire gear, you remember the officers respond in police uniform. When they respond to a fire, they actually change their clothes in front of the home, and all the equipment is in their scout car. So all their fire gear, breathing apparatus, it's all in that car, along with other bulletproof vests and other equipment that they need for their protection. So we need that vehicle. The reason why we switched well, let me back up to the hybrids. We tried the hybrid. I thought that would be a good idea. I have a brand new hybrid sitting in the parking lot if you'd like it. It's been in the shop about 10 times, and it's basically, we're trying to get it under similar to a lemon law. We're trying to get Ford to take it back. We couldn't, we got like maybe 20 miles on a brand new vehicle. We kept having problems with the electrical part of that hybrid system. So we're not going to do that again. So we switched the Tahoes, because actually the resale on a Tahoe after use is $13,000. The resale on the Ford Explorer is only $8,000. There's $2,000 increase to buy the Tahoe, but on the back end, we actually, in the long run, if you do the math, we're saving $3,000 by switching over to the Tahoe. So it's a very dependable. Talking to other agencies in Beverly Hills, that's all they have are the Tahoes. They've had no problems with the Tahoes. We've had a lot of problems with the Ford Explorers. So that's why we made the change to the Explorer. But we've always had the SUVs.
Yeah.
As far as the body cameras, Well, of course, you have to be able to turn off the camera because when they're on their breaks or if they go into the ladies' room or the men's room, obviously you have to be able to turn off your camera because the camera is affixed to the front of your chest, and they're not to be removed off and on because of the chance of possibly forgetting it on a table or a desk. So it's always there, but they have the ability to turn off and on. However, like I said earlier, the camera automatically is going to activate when they leave the car, when they pull it out of a holster, while they're inside of like I said, a building. If they're on lunch, they can then turn it off. But other than that, it'll automatically activate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Gail Linden, you have a question, Gail? Gail, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hold on. We'll
There
try
you
it
go.
again. It's off. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Tim. When analyzing revenue for the city, and he talks about city taxes, I'm well aware of the Headley Amendment that's been around since 1994 that caps revenue in the city by the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. And that is the amount that the city can collect in additional revenue, except for when a property sells and the cap comes off. And I wonder if there's ever been a study, because there have been at least 104 homes in Huntington Woods that sold last year through the multiple listing service, and other homes sold or new construction or whatever else, which brings in increased revenue to the city. And I wonder if there's ever a study that looks at the difference between what a property would have brought in taxes versus now what it is, because those taxes do go up considerably. I've lived in my house for 35 years, but it's only been 27 years that it's been capped. But the next person who buys this house is going to be paying twice what I'm paying, which is increased revenue to the city. And it is extra money to come in, and just to say, all we can collect is 1.6% more than we collected last year isn't truthful. We do get more, and I'm just wondering how different it is from year to year when the cap comes off and the new revenue comes in.
Yeah, so outside of the Headley formula is the new construction. So if there's a new build, they take the loss of the tear down and the difference between the loss and the new build. But on the uncapping, we don't collect the uncapping. So when a house uncaps, say the person's tax bill goes up by $2,000, every other resident in the city gets $1 off their tax bill. That's how it works.
Great.
It goes back into the
That's right.
whole, the city as a whole. So we don't collect that uncapping.
The millage gets the, yeah.
The cap actually applies to the city as a whole. And that comes into effect on the pop-up.
Okay.
We have to roll back the millage for basically every uncapping to keep it revenue
So
neutral.
it rolls back to every other citizen, and the other person is paying more and the other people are paying less than basically.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why I had to deal with those phone calls when their tax bill went up $4,000. I'm trying to explain to them the law is broken. It needs to be fixed. So that's at the state level.
Contact your legislators in Lansing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Zach Whitus, you have your hand raised, and thanks.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'd like to really thank Rich Feldman for his comments. I think that Rich brings some prophetic insight into this whole discussion. My middle name is Isaiah, named after the prophet Isaiah, prophet of Israel. And he has the famous line of, you should beat your swords into plowshares, meaning that you should take your weapons of war, your tasers, your surveillance cameras, and beat them into plowshares, convert them into something that's actually productive for society, that is life sustaining. And it seems pretty clear to me, listening to this discussion, that there's a real moral crisis in this community. I'm coming off of the streets after this last year, attending protests and marches and rallies, meeting with leaders of color from Detroit, Chicago, and across the country. And if we listen to those leaders in the movement for Black Lives, you don't hear them calling for more police surveillance. You just don't. You don't hear them calling for more sophisticated trainings or this or that. There's a clear call. There's a clear call, and that is to reduce funding for our bloated police departments and to reallocate that funding towards life-sustaining initiatives, like in the field of education and housing and healthcare. And so and I think that some of the discussion here about that, some people have said that it's somehow progressive to invest in more police surveillance, or it's progressive, to give the police more money for this thing or that. It's a lie, and it's a symptom of, I think, the deep segregation that continues to afflict Huntington Woods. Because if this town were desegregated, and if Metro Detroit were desegregated, and the people on the Huntington Woods City Commission but not just the commission, the affluent, predominantly white folks throughout the city, if they were really exposed to the social movements that are coursing through this country, they would understand that what they're doing is by no means progressive, and it's laughable to call it progressive. It's more, as Rich said, business as usual. Give more money to the cops. If we look at, I think, and again, it's great. I think, and I'm being totally, I think it's totally great that we're investing $2,000 in anti-racism initiatives, and that we're exploring the rezoning process in order to create multifamily units. That's all really positive. I don't want to take anything away from that. But rezoning isn't the same as creating subsidized housing and creating more affordable housing through public investment. We need to be doing a lot more, and I think it really illustrates for me very clearly the moral crisis that we're all implicated in here. That we're putting $2,000 towards anti-racism initiatives, then we have these other things that very well could lead to anti-racist outcomes down the road. Don't want to erase that entirely, but that the priority seems to be, let's give tens of thousands of dollars more to the police, and that's a direct consequence to really pursuing a reparations program, and creating a community that is more inclusive by putting the money where our mouths are. And so I just, I would implore the city commission to do more, to really listen to the movement for Black lives. They have their policy visions online. You can look at them and study them, and it's shockingly clear, and it defies credulity to think that more police surveillance and body cameras is at all in line with them. So I want to celebrate what's worth celebrating. Anti-racism initiatives, $2,000. It's a lot more than zero. That's great. But there's a long way to go here. And I would implore all of you to please do more. The country needs you.
Mr. Leitis, this is Commissioner Elder. I am very upset with you right now because this anti-racism plan is not just $2,000. We have spoken with you multiple times about this. Stop misrepresenting this plan.
Okay, Steve Gold, you have your hand raised. Please.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I want to go back to the Park and Recreation Department. Not as dramatic as our previous conversation, but still. I see that the position, the halftime position for Colette Newton is not going to be refilled, if I understand that correctly, and that position is going to be transferred to a communications person in administration. No, if I got that wrong? Oh, please explain it to me.
We are going to replace Colette's position. The communication position is a new half-time, part-time position. And we lost a half-time position at the Recreation Department when we did some realignment of duties.
I see. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was going to say, I'm a major admirer of Colette and what she did for the city, and there won't be another Colette, but I do think somebody should stay in that position. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, any other final comments or questions from the commission?
So 2.
Joanne, Crystal, did you have a comment or a question? Go ahead.
Joanne?
Go ahead, Joanne.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just want to say this is the first time for me listening to a budget meeting. I've lived in Huntington Woods for over 40 years. And I have to agree with Zach. Maybe, you know, he made an error on the $2,000. I can't say that, but the word progressive these days is just bantered around so loosely. And I too feel that where the Huntington Woods feels that they're being progressive in their policing or the purchase of body cameras, it's just not the case. And I want to say to the police chief, I appreciate the police in Huntington Woods. I have had an emergency or two of my own over 40 plus years and appreciate what they do. But I think that we're just, you know, old fogies on this, and we just look at things the same way, you know, year after year, election after election. And sometimes it takes a new set of eyes. And with this movement that we've had since last summer, I think there are different ways of looking at the public safety department. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Jenks.
Yeah, just one comment. I looked at public safety because Zach sort of implied that there was a huge jump. I noticed the increase in the budget was 0.93%. It's not an awful huge amount. Ideally, it would be wonderful if we didn't have to pay for police and we could ignore fire and instant response.
Okay, I would like to thank Tim and his department for all their work in preparing this budget and encourage all of the commissioners, if you have any other questions on anything, to contact him. He's a wealth of knowledge and can explain a lot of what's in the detail in this report. With that, I'll have a motion to adjourn the special city commission meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.